Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our live coverage of the latest mission from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. I'm Will Robinson Smith. I'll be providing our commentary for the duration of this coverage. We are broadcasting, as we always do, from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. To all of our friends and viewers joining us from the United States or Americans abroad, I hope you all had a wonderful and relaxing, hopefully fully extended long weekend break for the Independence Day holiday. No, there were plenty of us who had the 4th of July day off, but plenty of work to be done. So we were back at it on Friday and then off the weekend, back for another busy week. And boy, what a busy week it will be. Kicking things off in less than 59 minutes, if all holds now, for the launch of the Turksat 6A satellite. Currently encapsulated at the top of the Falcon 9 rocket you see there sitting at pad 40 over at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. SpaceX has a roughly 4-hour launch window for this mission. Weather is going to be, again, a watch item today. No surprise here, as it is Florida, it is early July, and we are in the late afternoon, which is a typical combination for some thunderstorm activity. And while the shot here looks pretty good, let's go ahead and take a peek at the wide shot here, our vantage point of the rocket from the press site. The 45th Weather Squadron only forecast about a 30% chance of favorable weather for liftoff during the launch window today. In other words, a 70% chance of violating weather conditions. So continuing to keep a close eye on that. We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. But first, a bit about our team supporting the mission today. Of course, we have our regular crew on standby for this launch. Stephen Young running the technical operations of the broadcast, our editor of Spaceflight Now. Our launch photographers poised and ready to snap some great photos of the rocket, an afternoon flight of a Falcon 9, always a great sight to see here on Florida's Space Coast. Adam Bernstein here at the press site, Michael Caine getting ready to snap the rocket over on the Cape side. If you're not following them on X, you can find them at their handles here. Adam is at A Burn NYC, Michael Caine at MD Caine Jr. And while you're over there, be sure to give Spaceflight Now a follow simply at Spaceflight Now. We'll also be joined by our friends Pete Karstens with Max Q Productions and Chuck Briggs in helping to track this rocket when they are ready to launch. I also want to thank our wonderful moderators in the live chat for helping us out as usual. So I see Astro Jen checking in the live chat, Callistia Lee. I know we saw Rusty Shackelford earlier this afternoon as the stream was just about to get going. So good to see all of you here. We'll keep our eyes out for any of our other mods who happen to pop in to the chat. Do want to thank the more than 1,300 of you who are joining with us live as we're kicking things off. If you haven't already, great way to help us out would just be by hitting the like button and sharing the stream. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to Spaceflight Now just by clicking that join button beneath the video. Click and subscribe. Be sure to click the bell icon too while you're at it. That way you'll get notifications when we do start these live streams, when we post new videos here on YouTube as well. We're also powered by a wonderful channel member community here on YouTube that really helps keep us going. So thanks to folks like Donald Hereford, that Opal guy, Paz Maria H, Kelly Alexander, another one of our moderators, Astro Joe, Tim Cossert? Apologies, Tim, if I just butchered your last name there. Matthew Lowry, many, many more as well. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop.spaceflightnow.com. Access to member-only videos here on YouTube, and of course the ability to watch all of our mission liftoff moments from here at the Cape in 4K. And it looks like without any Q, y'all are already on the next bit I was just about to hit, which is asking where you're watching from. Seeing Minnesota, Michigan, Largo, Florida, Gold Coast, Australia. I see you, Phil. And yes, just to bolster some points being made by our channel members and some of our moderators here, please be courteous to one another in the live chat. We're not here to fight and bicker. This is not a politics channel, so kindly be respectful of everyone's views, and let's try to keep things to about spaceflight. I mean, you could talk about other things as well, but do so respectfully. And of course, if people have questions about this mission or anything else going on, just remember, even though you may have seen dozens of launches either through us or of your own volition, this could very well be someone's very first time being a part of our live broadcast. So be kind to those first timers, and we welcome all folks here in our community. Speaking of our community, want to mark a couple of milestones for folks. Well-reasoned Superhawk's been a member for 8 months, who's watching from the east side of Orlando. Hopefully the weather's a little bit better over in that neck of the woods. I know coming up from the southern part of Brevard County, it was quite stormy on I-95. Astro Joe's been a member for 24 months. Who says, time flies when you're having fun. Yes, indeed, Astro Joe. We appreciate what you do for us in the moderator capacity and just being a channel member in general. And Clisty Lee, thanks for gifting 10 Spaceflight Now memberships. Really appreciate that bit of generosity to get us going. Last but not least, if you do have a comment or question about this launch in particular or about other happenings in spaceflight, you can use the YouTube Super Chat feature. And not only will you be helping support what we do here at Spaceflight Now, but you'll give us some interesting things to talk about as we continue on through the count. Speaking of that count, we're T-minus 52 minutes, 14 seconds and counting. About 14 minutes away from the SpaceX launch director nominally taking the poll for the start of prop load on today's mission. For those who may be joining for the first time or unfamiliar with the process, unlike some other launch companies, SpaceX does their poll electronically so they don't go through the control room and do a voice check off. Members of the launch control team will enter their position point of view electronically. So that poll can be taken a little bit earlier than T-minus 38 minutes or right about that point. But nominally speaking, that's when they will go ahead and take that marker. Assuming they are in a good position to start fueling, that process will start at the T-minus 35 minute point. With a couple of events. One, of course, being the loading of RP-1, or rocket-grade kerosene, on both the first and second stages of the Falcon 9 rocket. At the same time, liquid oxygen is loaded on board the Falcon 9's first stage. T-minus 16 minutes, second stage liquid oxygen loading begins. Before that happens, though, at about T-minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds, that'll be the start of thermally conditioning the feed lines at the pad, chilling them down prior to that second stage LOX load. We'll see evidence of that in the form of the so-called big vent at about T-minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds, give or take a couple seconds. T-minus 7 minutes, the chill down of the 9 Merlin engines gets underway. That involves flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps. Helps protect the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. About 6 minutes before liftoff, the first stage kerosene tank should be full. In T-minus 4.5 minutes, we'll see the strong back retract sequence begin. It starts with the clamp arms underneath the payload fairings opening up, and the transporter erector, or the strong back, will recline about 1.5 degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket. and it will stay in that position until liftoff, at which point the Falcon or the transporter erector will pull back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. About 3 minutes prior to liftoff, the first stage LOX tank should be full. Same is true, second stage LOX tank at about the T-minus 2 minute mark. At that point, the Falcon 9 will be fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final 60 seconds, control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers. The propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. SpaceX launch director will give their go for launch at 45 seconds out. The engine ignition command will be issued at T-minus 3 seconds, and if all 9 engines ignite and are healthy, the flight computer will give the command for the hold-down clamps to release the Falcon 9 for a nominal T0 liftoff, which again is currently targeting the opening of a 4-hour launch window, which at this moment in time is 5:21 p.m. Eastern, 21:21 UTC. Or in other words, in T-minus 48 minutes and 46 seconds. Currently T-minus 44 minutes, 35 seconds and counting. Mentioned I would come back to the weather in a more specific way, so let's go ahead and touch on that briefly as we continue to track the launch of the Falcon 9 rocket, nominally in 44 minutes and 8 seconds. Most recent published launch weather forecast for today's opportunity, this 4-hour window, showed only about a 30% chance of favorable weather at liftoff. Some of those concerns that meteorologists with the 45th Weather Squadron are tracking are the cumulus cloud rule, the anvil cloud rules, and the surface electric fields rule. A number of those, and one of the primary things that the meteorologists at the 45th are trying to keep track of are the potential for not only a lightning strike from a thunderstorm that could be in the area, but also for the rocket to potentially generate its own electricity and generate its own lightning strike, which would obviously be quite disastrous for the rocket as well as the payload on board. And while things may be cleared one direction, especially if there are thunderstorms in the area or detached anvil cloud, as we've learned in some of our recent conversations with meteorologists with the Launch Weather Office, a lightning strike can happen quite a distance away from an anvil cloud or the core of a thunderstorm. So they take all of that into consideration when they create these launch weather forecasts and try to work with the launch providers, whoever they may be, to find the safest possible path forward with the launch vehicle. Again, being that we are in the early to mid-July time frame, and this is a late afternoon, early evening launch window, forecast today is the forecast tomorrow, and if I were a betting man, I'd say probably would be the forecast in 48-hour turnaround, though the Launch Weather Office doesn't typically produce 48-hour forecasts for most missions. They do for some, certainly. Publish those. Now, T-minus 41 minutes, 44 seconds and counting. Just a few minutes away from the point at which the SpaceX launch director will need to make the call on the start of prop load if they feel like they're in a good position to do so and are able to hit the opening of the launch window. As we're waiting and watching for that, let's go ahead and talk about where we'll be watching this Falcon 9 rocket fly once it's able to leave the pad. This is a mission that will send the Turksat 6A satellite to a geosynchronous transfer orbit once it leaves Pad 40, Space Launch Complex 40, or Slick 40, there at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, meaning it will fly essentially due east once it lifts off from the pad. The first stage booster that's supporting this mission, tail number 1076 in the SpaceX fleet, as you see on the screen, will be landing on the SpaceX drone ship called Just Read the Instructions. If all goes well, this will be the 86th booster landing for this particular drone ship and the 328th overall booster landing for SpaceX to date. Now, SpaceX also will attempt to recover the payload fairings that are encapsulating Turksat 6A satellite, protecting it on the climb uphill. Those will gently float down under the support of parachute system and splash down into the Atlantic Ocean water. SpaceX reports saving about $6 million per recovery effort, so it's an important part of their business model to do so if they're able. SpaceX is also in the process of certifying both its fairing halves as well as its first stage boosters for up to 40 missions. Here's what it looks like when they bring a fairing half on board one of their recovery vessels. may look somewhat similar to this depending on how quickly they're able to get to them this evening, and of course, what time the launch ends up being today, if they are able to launch, weather permitting. We're now T minus 38 minutes, 50 seconds and counting. For those who may be just joining us now, welcome aboard. You're joining our live coverage currently in progress of the Turksat 6A satellite mission, a communications satellite for the country of Turkey. An important mission for them, certainly a point of national pride since this is their first satellite that was manufactured from and will also be operated from Turkey itself. And at this point, SpaceX should be taking that poll or concluding that poll on the start of propellant load today. If, again, they are ready to launch at the opening of the window, that's 5:21 Eastern. Just looking at the radar views over the next about an hour or so, it appears as though most of the inclement weather is hanging around and a little bit to the west of Interstate 95 here, one of the main north-south thoroughfares in Brevard County for those unfamiliar with the area of Florida's Space Coast. We will see if the weather is far enough away, though, to allow meteorologists and SpaceX to feel comfortable enough proceeding into fueling the Falcon 9 rocket. Which, if they are ready to do so, will begin in just over 1 minute. And of course, as we are continuing to watch the weather, SpaceX has updated the T0 time for this mission. We are now looking at a liftoff at 5:41. 5:41, so we have reset our countdown clock. We are now T minus 53 minutes, 55 seconds and counting. Again, SpaceX does have a roughly 4-hour launch window for this mission today, as long as they have not started fueling. They use a load and go style of fueling operation, which essentially means that they are tanking the Falcon 9 rocket practically to the point of liftoff. And so once fueling has begun, they are committing to a launch attempt at that time. A shuffling of only about 20 minutes would suggest that maybe they, and by they I mean both SpaceX and the 45th Weather Squadron, perhaps feel as though, given a little bit of extra margin there, they may get past whatever weather system that they're tracking. Hopefully it will either break up enough or move far enough away from the pad that it will create a buffer zone. We'll be able to see the liftoff of the Falcon 9 in a little more than 52 minutes. Currently at T-minus 46 minutes, 55 seconds and counting. For those who may be just joining us, and we're anticipating us being a little bit further into our launch timeline, SpaceX did adjust the T0 for this mission, noting that the liftoff now set for 5:41 p.m. Eastern, 21:41 UTC. A push into the window of 20 minutes to hopefully get past some inclement weather that is, by all accounts from just looking at video, not in the immediate vicinity of the pad, but if you take a holistic look, was likely close enough that they wanted to give themselves a little bit more time. SpaceX themselves has not confirmed that the adjustment was due to weather, but looking at what the 45th Weather Squadron was saying coming into this launch opportunity and just taking a live look at the radar right now, it would not be outside of the realm of possibility for that to have been the reason for the adjustment. So where we are now is we're about 7 minutes and some change away from SpaceX once again reaching the point at which they will need to make a decision on the start of prop load, which will begin at the T-minus 35-minute mark. So just a little past 10 minutes from where we are right now is when fueling will begin, again, assuming that they feel comfortable to move forward with that. Taking a look at the live chat here, I want to thank the more than 3,600 of you who are joining with us live this afternoon. Again, I hope you all had a wonderful weekend, got some rest, relaxation, hopefully some good food if you were celebrating the Independence Day holiday. If you haven't already, we'd certainly appreciate it if you could hit that like button for us and allow some more folks to find their way into our live coverage as we continue to roll along. Also want to welcome a couple new channel members here. So welcome to Michael McLeod joining us with channel membership at the pad leader level. Leslie Danielle upgrading their membership to the mission specialist level. Appreciate that, Leslie. Paz Mary H marking channel membership for a month. Good to see you continuing on with this, Paz. Who marvels at the age of the universe at excess of 13 billion years old. And a thanks to Callistia Lee for gifting 10 Spaceflight memberships. Really appreciate that generosity, Callistia, and thanks for what you do as a moderator as well. Currently T-minus 42 minutes, 21 seconds and counting. Liftoff of the Turksat 6A mission. Coming into this launch opportunity, the Turkish Minister of Transport and Infrastructure described the launch of this geostationary satellite as, quote, the symbol of our independence, Reason for that being because this satellite represents the first of likely many that Turkey was able to manufacture and will operate from Turkish soil. Taking a look now from one of their agencies involved in the development of this satellite as they perform some testing of the solar panels prior to their integration onto the vehicle. Those solar panels fully extended are about 10 meters or 32.8 feet long and have a total area of about 37.7 square meters or about 405.8 square feet. Turksat says that they should be able to provide about 9.2 kilowatts of power, enough to provide power for the spacecraft to last for its nominal lifetime of 15 years once it arrives on orbit. Set to operate in the 42 east longitude position in a geocentric orbit. It'll be about 35,786 kilometers above the Earth's surface. I'll show you some more imagery of the satellite itself as we get closer to the liftoff, but here's just a little glimpse of it looking at what will help power the spacecraft itself. Now T-minus 40 minutes, 9 seconds and counting. Just a couple minutes, SpaceX will hit the point at which they'll once again need to make the call on the start of prop load. If they feel like they are ready to do so, though, they can take that poll anytime now. But if they are ready to move ahead with fueling, that process will begin at the T-minus 35 minute mark. So we will continue to watch and wait and bring you any updates should that T0 time be adjusted once again. We're currently at T-minus 37 minutes, 19 seconds and counting. Again, now past the point at which SpaceX will have made a call on the start of prop load. Generally speaking, for the area of KSC and Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, We've been fairly lightning free for most of the afternoon. However, there is a lightning watch in the southern part of the Cape right now. Means lightning is expected but not currently happening and having a direct impact. And just for a sense of geography, Pad 40 is on the northern side. So again, just something we will keep an eye on. Phase 1 lightning watch would not necessarily cause a weather scrub, but it is something that meteorologists will continue to track the direction of any inclement weather, of course, as we continue on through the count. You're now T-minus 36 minutes and 10 seconds. Assuming fueling will begin in the next minute and some change, what we're looking at is, if you see near the base of the transporter erector where it starts to taper in just about at that point, slightly above it, is where we'll start to see a little bit of vapor form, potentially a little bit of a frost ring as well, if the lighting conditions are right from this angle, as the super cold densified liquid oxygen is loaded on board the tank in the Falcon 9 first stage. Assuming fueling begins in less than 30 seconds from now, we usually start to see some of that begin at about the T-minus 33 to 32 minute mark. We're now at T-minus 34 minutes, 48 seconds and counting. Assuming SpaceX and the 45th Weather Squadron felt comfortable about where things will be in less than 35 minutes, fueling will have begun by now. We're awaiting confirmation, either visual or in text form from SpaceX to confirm that. Again, we'll keep watching for those signs of fueling that I just mentioned a moment or two ago. It's currently 5:10 p.m. Eastern Time. The reason I'm reading the time like that is because we have a new T0 for SpaceX, just adjusting our countdown clock now. Looking at a new T0 of 6 o'clock p.m. So in now 49 minutes, 32 seconds and counting. SpaceX makes another adjustment for the Turksat 6A mission. Again, they did have a 4-hour window coming into today's launch opportunity. So as long as they have not begun fueling the Falcon 9 rocket, they have some latitude to move back a little bit further. We're currently T-minus 46 minutes, 25 seconds and counting. Again, if you're just joining us, SpaceX has adjusted the T0 for the Turksat 6A mission today, now at 6 p.m. Eastern, 2200 UTC for our friends joining around the world. And SpaceX now notes, as we thought was likely the case, that they are continuing to monitor the weather conditions near Pad 40 over at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, as now a Phase 2 lightning watch is in effect for the areas of Port Canaveral and the southern part of the Cape. So not in the immediate vicinity of Pad 40, but creeping slightly closer. Of course, meteorologists in SpaceX are continue to keep an eye on that and look for any possible openings to support a safe launch of this mission. The weather, though, as we talked about earlier in our broadcast, was somewhat dismal as far as the outlook coming into it, with just a 30% chance of favorable weather at liftoff, with teams tracking the cumulus cloud rule, the interval cloud rules, and the surface electric fields rule. Of course, we'll continue monitoring the progress of this mission and keep you updated, as SpaceX still has a healthy amount of margin left for this launch opportunity today. Currently T-minus 40 minutes, 36 seconds and counting. Just about 2 minutes away from the point in which SpaceX will once again be in a position where they need to make a call on whether they feel ready to proceed with prop load. About 5 minutes from now. Although, given that we are seeing more potential impacts from lightning starting to push in the areas of Kennedy Space Center and Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, I would hazard a guess that we may again, I'll stress may, since we have not seen the adjustment yet, but could likely see another adjustment of the T0 liftoff time. We'll, of course, provide you with the very latest as soon as we learn it. It is now 5:22 p.m. Eastern. We do have another new T0 update for everyone. SpaceX is now targeting 6:30 p.m. 6:30 p.m. Eastern for the launch of the Turksat 6A mission. Hoping to lift off from Pad 40 if they're able to find some good weather. They're just looking at the radar. You can see there's like a little bit of a, don't know the proper meteorological term for it, but a bit of a little bubble up that extends just a nice piece beyond the heart of the storm cell to the south of us. That is the likely culprit of why we are now pushing back our T0 to T-minus 1 hour, 6 minutes, 32 seconds and counting. We're currently T-minus 57 minutes, 33 seconds and counting, as SpaceX at this moment in time continues to target 6:30 p.m. Eastern, 22:30 UTC for our friends joining us around the world for the launch of the Turksat 6A mission. I want to thank the more than 5,000 of you who are hanging tough with us as we continue to track some less than ideal weather SpaceX is hoping to navigate through for the launch of this Falcon 9 mission. When it does go ahead, this will be the 296th reflight of a booster, launch of a booster that has flown at least once. To get there, though, SpaceX has been trying to navigate some fairly thorny weather. Before we talk a little bit more about that, I want to thank the folks who are supporting us this afternoon, early evening. Paz Mary H with a $2 super chat. Thank you, Paz. Marking the first Falcon 1 launch back in 06. Been quite a while and quite a ways since the Falcon 1 days. Christina McKenzie, marking channel membership for a month at the pad leader level. Always great to see folks pass the 1 month mark and continue on with us. It's very much appreciated. Christina says, love these launches. Doesn't seem like this launch is going to happen today now, does it? Well, I hope it does, though. Well, hope springs eternal, and we will continue to be with you until or unless SpaceX calls the ball game. But again, they do have quite a bit of latitude in their 4-hour launch window, which extends out to about 9:21 this evening. If SpaceX is not able to launch today, they can pivot to their 24-hour backup, the window opening at the same time that this one began, 5:21 p.m. Eastern. It's going to be quite a busy day tomorrow, though, and we certainly are hoping that SpaceX can find the window for this mission to launch, as tomorrow is not only the backup day for this mission, but the primary launch day for the debut of the all-important Ariane 6 rocket from French Guiana. It's been just over a year since the final flight of the Ariane 5, and the European Space Agency and its member states have been eagerly awaiting the debut of their very own launch vehicle, which, according to the most recent estimates, will launch nominally about 10 times per year once it ramps up to that point. Assuming they're able to launch successfully tomorrow, they have one more mission planned this year, and then we'll turn to a handful of them next year. We have a whole article up on the Ariane 6, its preparations for launch, what it's launching, and all that jazz. That's currently up on our website right now for your reading pleasure. Maybe a good way to spend the time until SpaceX finds the weather window that is optimal for this mission. ESA has a launch window that also runs 4 hours tomorrow, which goes from 2 till 6 p.m. Eastern, 1900 to 2300 UTC. So, again, assuming if this mission is not able to launch today, it's going to be a bit of a squeeze between flights potentially tomorrow. So, buckle up for that. For now, though, you may have noticed things getting slightly darker from our vantage point here at the press site as you take a look at this wide shot here. Fortunately, of course, we have our astute photographer Adam Bernstein here with us at the press site. Was able to look back at some of the weather that is rolling on in. You can see some of those clouds making their way over the press site here. And of course is the iconic vehicle assembly building there in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. just to the right of that, you could barely see the cranes there in that shot, just to the right of the Launch Control Center, the LCC. You can see some cranes there just at the bottom of the frame. You may notice a structure that they're working on there. That is the base elements of the Mobile Launcher 2, which will support the larger Block 1B version of NASA's Space Launch System rocket, which will start launching with the exploration upper stage, which will replace the interim cryogenic propulsion stage that's used on the Artemis 1, 2, and 3 missions. In fact, the Artemis 2 core stage, which is currently at the Michoud Assembly Facility, or the MAF, down in southern Louisiana, that's getting ready to load up on the Pegasus barge and make its way down here to the Cape a little bit later this month. Of course, we'll have much more on that when it does arrive. As we continue to track the progress, hopefully, of the Turksat 6A mission, let's go ahead and talk about the booster that's going to be launching this vehicle. It has the tail number 1076 in the SpaceX fleet, going for its 15th flight today, hopefully today. Its first launch came back on November 22nd, 2022. November 26, 2022, excuse me. That was the 26th Commercial Resupply Services, or CRS, mission, sending up thousands of pounds of cargo and science supplies up to the International Space Station. That was followed up by the OneWeb Flight 16 mission, the second of 3 dedicated flights, sending up OneWeb satellites manufactured right here on Florida's Space Coast at the Airbus OneWeb Satellites facility here on Merritt Island. Back at the beginning of 2023. Then launched its first batch of Starlink satellites, Starlink 6-1. The first batch of these Starlink V2 mini satellites, as a matter of fact, on this mission, February 27th of 2023. That was followed by a mission for Intelsat 40E, which also carried aboard the Tempo payload as a rideshare. Tempo, which is, of course, acronym from NASA, the Tropospheric Emissions Monitoring of Pollutions satellite, designed to monitor air quality above the United States, North America writ large. That was followed by a number of Starlink missions, Starlink 6-3 on May 19th, Starlink 6-6 on July 24th, 6-14 on September 9th, 6-21 on October 5th. And then it was followed by a mission for Luxembourg-based SES. That was a pair of O3B Power satellites manufactured by Boeing on behalf of SES. Lifted off from Pad 40 on November 12th, 2023. Moving into this year, launch for communications company Ovzon, the Ovzon 3 satellite. And that was followed by Starlink 6-40 on February 29th. Then the Eutelsat 36D satellite on March 30th. And finally, a couple of Starlink missions to bring us into the present. Starlink 6-54 on April 28th. And most recently, Starlink 6-64 on June 1st. Now, T-minus 48 minutes, 5 seconds and counting. Once again, we find ourselves about 10 minutes away from the point at which the SpaceX launch director will need to make another call on whether or not they feel like they're in a good position to start fueling this Falcon 9 rocket. If they do feel like they are ready, they can take that poll early. Otherwise, we're looking at the point about 10 minutes from now which they'll make that call on proceeding or punting, as it were. We're now currently T-minus 42 minutes, 7 seconds and counting as it currently stands. Just about 4 minutes away from SpaceX needing to once again make a call on the start of prop load. They do have a launch window that extends out to 9:21 p.m. Eastern, 01:21 UTC for our friends around the world. You can see now, even from our wide camera view pointing to the east, some of the cloud cover starting to build into the area around here. So very much continuing to keep an eye on the weather outlook, as that seems to, of course, be the limiting item for today's launch opportunity. Taking a look at our live chat here, though, want to thank a few folks for your support as we continue to track the progress, hopefully, of this Falcon 9 towards launch this afternoon, early evening. Want to thank Helo Pilot for a very generous $50 super chat. Really appreciate that, Helo Pilot. Thank you for supporting us on that level. And Helo Pilot says, I appreciate your calm, minimal narration while providing just the right amount of insight, allowing the viewer to take in the experience in a more personal way. Appreciate you noticing our style here. We try to strike the right balance of keeping everyone informed, and especially as things are progressing, providing you updates and information about the rocket and the payload, the launch conditions, and all of that, while also just allowing you to take in the sights and the sounds around here at Cape Canaveral. So thanks again for noticing that and for supporting us at that level, Hilo. Also want to thank Butterfly for being a channel member with us for now 6 months. It says, wow, a fast and fun 6 months. Enjoyed watching the launches with all of you. We enjoy having you with us, Butterfly, and for your insight and questions. I see a couple folks asking about the trajectory of the mission. As we get closer to the launch, we'll come back to the trajectory map again. But as that Opal guy, I believe, pointed out, and Clisty Lee as well, letting folks know who are asking in the live chat, yes, this rocket will fly essentially due east once it leaves the pad, as SpaceX is going to be sending the Turksat 6A satellite into a geosynchronous transfer orbit once it leaves the pad. One of our channel members, Charles, checking in, sounds like in the area of Cocoa Beach this afternoon, saying lots of lightning in the Cocoa Beach area, which for those unfamiliar with the Space Coast geography is pretty much due south of where we are here at the Cape. Noting lots of lightning down there, also on the other side of MIMS, which is to our north and slightly to the west. As you can see, getting much darker here from Chuck Briggs' camera, who has got eyes for us over on the Cape side of things. Back here from the press side, you can see it's gotten quite a bit darker with a number of clouds that have moved over the area. And as you can see from the countdown clock, we're now T-minus 37 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. At this point, SpaceX will need to make a call on the start of prop load, which, if they feel like things will be good enough for them to safely launch 37 minutes, give or take, then propellant load course, as I speak that, we are now tracking a liftoff, now shifting another 30-minute slide to 7 p.m. 7 p.m. Eastern, or 2300 UTC. Be adjusting our countdown clock, so stand by. Here you see we're now at T-minus 1 hour, 6 minutes, 45 seconds, and counting. Again, just as a reminder, SpaceX does have a 4-hour launch window for this mission today, lasting until 9:21. And as long as they have not begun fueling, they do have the ability to move back that T0. But the weather is not looking optimal heading into the rest of the window, as you can see here on your screen. But things can certainly change, and we will continue to track this mission and any updates as we continue to move along. Again, we are now looking at a 7 o'clock planned liftoff time for the Falcon 9 rocket from Pad 40 on the Turksat 6A mission. We are currently T-minus 51 minutes, 9 seconds and counting as it stands right now. SpaceX targeting a current T0 at 7 o'clock on the dot. As a reminder, they do have until 9:21 for the window remaining. Taking a look at our wide shot here, you can see still some clouds lingering around the area of the pad, although starting to see a bit more blue sky from this particular viewpoint. That said, I believe we still have some phase 2 lightning watches, or lightning warnings in the area of the Cape. So while things may visually look like they're improving, and from a very non-professional view, they appear to be, certainly keeping an eye on the greater weather picture as we continue to move on through the count. For those who may not have been with us earlier in the broadcast, let's go ahead and talk about the trajectory of the mission once the Falcon 9 is ready to leave the launch pad here. This is its planned flight path. Of course, on the right-hand side of your screen, you're seeing a live look at Space Launch Complex, or SLIC 40, there at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. His satellite view from Google Earth there on the right, or on the left, excuse me. The Falcon 9 will be flying due east once it leaves the pad, as this is a mission sending the Turksat 6A satellite to a geosynchronous transfer orbit. Following stage separation, the first stage booster, tail number 1076 in the SpaceX fleet, will touch down on the SpaceX drone ship called Just Read the Instructions. It's one of two that SpaceX has stationed here on the East Coast, the other one being a shortfall of gravitas. A little bit further downrange, the first stage booster, or from the first stage booster landing, the payload fairings will also be jettisoned and recovered by one of SpaceX's recovery vessels. Both the booster and the fairing halves will be brought back to Port Canaveral, turned over to Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, where SpaceX will examine them, refurbish them, and likely turn them around for future flights. Now, once the first stage booster and the rest of the Falcon 9 rocket is ready to leave the pad, let's talk about the launch timeline, so everything after that T0 marker. About a minute 14 after liftoff, the Falcon 9 will pass through Max Q, or the point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle. That'll be followed by a few events in fairly rapid succession. About 2 minutes 32 seconds after liftoff, the 9 Merlin 1D engines will cease firing, an event called MECO, or first stage main engine cutoff. It'll be followed 3 seconds later by stage separation, and then the Merlin vacuum engine on the Falcon 9 will ignite for its first burn, SES-1, T plus 2 minutes 43 seconds. The payload fairings will be jettisoned at about 3 minutes 15 seconds into flight. Fast forward about 3 additional minutes. First stage entry burn will begin, that entry burn lasting about 24 seconds in total, and slowing the vehicle down to prepare for the landing burn. Before that begins, we'll see the second stage engine cutoff, or SECO-1. About T plus 8 minutes and 7 seconds. 3 seconds after that, the first stage landing burn begins, setting up for a touchdown on the drone ship. Just read the instructions at about T plus 8 minutes, 36 seconds. This mission is quite a bit shorter than the Starlink flights that we're more used to seeing here. At about T plus 27 minutes and 17 seconds, the second stage engine will have a second burn lasting 63 seconds in total, a little more than a minute, setting up the Turksat 6A satellite to deploy at T plus 35 minutes and 31 seconds. And because this is a geostationary mission, there will not be a deorbit burn for this mission, but essentially it will be raised up into, it's called a graveyard orbit, so out of the way of the other geostationary satellites. We're now T minus 45 minutes, 5 seconds and counting. Just about 7 minutes away from another decision point for SpaceX if it feels as though the weather is clearing up enough that it thinks it can make a run at it at 7 o'clock. Fueling will begin at T minus 35 minutes, so in fewer than 10 minutes from now. It's now 6:17 p.m. Eastern. We do have a new T0 time from SpaceX, another 30-minute adjustment here. SpaceX now targeting 7:30 p.m. Eastern for the hopeful launch of the Turksat 6A satellite on behalf of the company Turksat. As you can see, we've adjusted our countdown clock. Now T minus 1 hour, 11 minutes, 47 seconds and counting. Currently T minus 52 minutes, 22 seconds and counting. Slight positive update. The Phase 2 Lightning watches have been lifted, so that is trending slightly better. Continuing to watch the weather, of course, as SpaceX is hoping to thread the needle here, find an opportunity to launch the Turksat 6A satellite. They're excuse me, continuing to target that 7:30 p.m. Eastern liftoff time, with about 2 hours of margin remaining left in the window for today. We're now T-minus 42 minutes, 11 seconds and counting. Once again, just about 4 minutes away from the point at which SpaceX needs to make that call on the start of propellant load if they feel like they are in a good position to do so. Things look a little dark here from a cloud perspective. Looking at a zoomed in view of pad 40, taking a wider vantage point. Still see a fair number of clouds hanging around the area, but some peaks of sunshine crossing through as well. Looks may be deceptive though, as there are other considerations like anvil clouds that may be factoring into the launch weather forecast and the potential opportunity for a launch today. So SpaceX and the 45th Weather Squadron continuing to keep a close eye on the launch opportunity today and see if they may be able to find enough of a window of opportunity for this launch. Taking a look at our live chat here, want to thank Mitchell Wilbur for a very generous $20 super chat. Really appreciate that, Mitchell. Thanks for your support at that level. Who says, Will, Calistia Lee, Astro Jen, and the others, thanks for the job you do, especially on days like this. We appreciate you. Thank you for the kind words and for the support, Mitchell. We appreciate you and your super chat, as well as continued support through channel membership. And we will continue to stay with you, of course, through this launch opportunity today. For those who may be just popping in here, it's just about 6:50 here on the East Coast. Currently T-minus 40 minutes, 14 seconds and counting till the planned T0 liftoff with the Falcon 9 rocket as it currently stands. SpaceX at the moment continues to target 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 23:30 UTC for the liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket you see here live on your screen. Nominally, SpaceX will need to make the call on the start of prop load in now just under 2 minutes. Assuming they feel like they're in a good position to move forward with prop load, that fueling process will begin at T-minus 35 minutes. Loading of RP-1 or rocket grade kerosene on both the first and the second stages of the Falcon 9 rocket. Same time, liquid oxygen will be loaded on board the Falcon 9's first stage. Once fueling has begun, though, SpaceX is committing to a T0 attempt, or making as good of a run at it as they possibly can. So SpaceX and the 45th Weather Squadron want to be as sure as possible from a weather standpoint, and of course as far as the health of the vehicle is concerned as well, before they proceed into the fueling operations today. If for whatever reason SpaceX is not able to launch their Falcon 9 rocket today, they do have a 24-hour backup opportunity with another 4-hour window that opens up at 5:20 p.m. Eastern tomorrow, 21:20 UTC. So in summation, to answer a question from the live chat, is everything good to go? Will there be a liftoff? Those are all very good questions, and unfortunately, ones only the launch gods know the true answer to. As of this singular moment in time, SpaceX is still targeting 7:30 p.m. Eastern for the launch of their Falcon 9 rocket. Call on the start of prop load will have been made by now, so we're standing by for any additional updates from SpaceX. See whether they either A, feel like they're in a good enough position and things are trending in the right direction to begin fueling, or B, the option that we've seen throughout the late afternoon, early evening. They will pivot to a later T0 time. We're now currently at T-minus 34 minutes, 55 seconds and counting. As I'm speaking this sentence, SpaceX has not made a further adjustment to the T0 so far as we can tell at this particular moment in time, which if that is in fact the case, it appears as though they may feel comfortable enough where things are trending to have gotten into the start of fueling at this point. Standing by for just another moment here, see if we get any more word from SpaceX, confirmation one way or the other. Here's what we're looking for, though. If you look near the base of the Falcon 9 rocket, you see just above the tree line there, there's a slightly light gray ring. It's right about that point where we'll start to see some evidence of the loading of the super cold densified liquid oxygen into the first stage tank. Little frost rings should start to form right about there as the super cold liquid oxygen is loaded into the tank and, of course, meets the much warmer air here in Florida. See a little bit of vapor in that part of the rocket, too, assuming, as it seems to be, that SpaceX has moved into fueling of the Falcon 9 rocket. We should start seeing some evidence of that with what I was just describing in the next minute or two, if in fact fueling has begun. And it does appear that we're starting to see that vapor ring forming near the base of the rocket. Taking a closer look at the base of the Falcon 9 rocket from our friend Chuck Briggs, you can see even more clearly the evidence of that vapor I was talking about forming near the base of the Falcon 9 as super cold liquid oxygen is beginning to flow on board the first stage of the Falcon 9 rocket. And now, just about 50 seconds ago, we do have word from SpaceX that, quote, all systems are looking good for today's launch of the Turksat 6A mission from Florida. Weather conditions have improved for liftoff, and propellant load is underway. So good confirmation verbally, or written, I should say, from what we're seeing visually. Again, if you're just joining us, you're watching our live coverage from Spaceflight now of the Turksat 6A mission. And after a number of delays due to some inclement weather, propellant load has officially begun on the Falcon 9 rocket. Now T-minus 27 minutes, 25 seconds and counting. With propellant load underway, SpaceX is committing to its current T0 target time of 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 23:30 UTC. Within the last couple of minutes as well, SpaceX has begun loading cryogenic helium onto the pressure vessels on the Falcon 9's first stage. The helium is used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. The same process will begin on the tanks of the second stage at about the T-minus 25-minute mark. Currently T-minus 24 minutes, 32 seconds and counting. In just about 4 minutes, we'll see the start of the big vent as SpaceX is thermally conditioning the feed lines ahead of second stage liquid oxygen load, which will begin at T-minus 16 minutes. That chill down process starts at about T-minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds, though the big vent, the very visual part of that, begins at about T-minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds. Before we hit that point, though, let's talk about the satellite that is flying today. This, of course, is the Turksat 6A satellite. Seeing some video here of the production of it, courtesy of one of the Turkish agencies that helped develop the satellite and will operate it through Turkish ground stations. Once it's on orbit, this particular satellite will operate at the 42 degrees east longitude position in a geocentric orbit at about 35,786 kilometers above the Earth's surface. There's the mission patch from Turksat for today's mission. Some promo video of the satellite itself, a little animation of what it'll look like on orbit, some of those ground systems I was just mentioning. The satellite notable because it's the first domestically built and operated satellite for Turkey. And as its transportation minister noted, Turkey will become just the 11th country in the world to be able to build and operate its own satellites, as opposed to contracting another country's space agency or domestic companies to build it on their behalf. This video you're seeing is the satellite going through a variety of test campaigns as they prepared for launch, things like thermal vacuum testing, mechanical stress tests. They did a separation demonstration. Those solar panels that you see there on the side of the spacecraft that are unfurling here on this animation, they are about 10 meters or 32.8 feet in length and have a total area of about 37.7 square meters or about 405.8 square feet. They'll produce about 9.2 kilowatts of power, which will power the satellite for its nominal lifetime of 15 years in operation on orbit. In order to help keep its position, this particular spacecraft also uses xenon gas-powered Hall effect propulsion motors, or HALE thrusters, for those in-orbit maneuvering. It's an electric propulsion system developed by Tibetak Uzay, which translated from Turkish is the Space Technologies Research Institute of the Scientific and Technological Research Institution of Turkey. It's an advisory agency to the country's Supreme Council for Science and Technology. And again, will be the operators of this particular satellite once it's on orbit. Taking a look back here at the pad as we are about 10 seconds away from the start of the so-called big vent. The visual beginning of the process of SpaceX conditioning those feed lines ahead of second stage LOX load, which is now getting underway right about on time. Appreciate our friend Chuck Briggs for providing this great view of the Falcon 9 rocket from the Cape side. And again, second stage LOX load will begin at T-minus 16 minutes. So this big vent will wrap up at about T-minus 16 minutes and 30 seconds. Now T-minus 16 minutes, 33 seconds and counting. You can see the big vent starting to taper off. SpaceX is getting ready to start second stage LOX load in now about 23 seconds. As we continue to progress towards a liftoff at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 23:30 UTC, certainly appreciate the nearly 7,000 of you who are watching with us live. If you haven't already, it would certainly be a big help if you could hit that like button for us. It shows the YouTube algorithm that folks are here and that y'all are engaged, and will hopefully bring a few more folks into our live coverage. We certainly appreciate the support. Be sure to subscribe to Spaceflight now also. Now's a good time to do that, as we're also gearing up for our live launch coverage tomorrow of the inaugural flight of the Arianespace built and ESA managed first mission for the Ariane 6 rocket, lifting off from French Guiana tomorrow afternoon. So we'll have extensive live coverage on that, including with some support from a friend of ours who is going to be joining us from over at ESA headquarters in France. So lots to talk about there. So now is a great time to subscribe to Spaceflight now. Be sure to hit that like button. And when you do subscribe, also click the bell icon and turn on all notifications, so that way you're alerted when we do start these live streams. We're now T-minus 14 minutes, 38 seconds and counting. At this point, second stage LOX load is now underway. I want to thank John Torrance, one of our wonderful channel members, for a very generous $20 super chat. Thank you, John. Good to see you this evening. Bit of ribbing here saying, must have missed the no all caps today. The trajectory is east. And yes, for those who missed our discussion earlier about trajectory, once the rocket leaves the pad, it will fly due east, as this is a mission sending the Turksat 6A satellite to a geosynchronous transfer orbit. This particular satellite will be operating in the 42 degrees east longitude position in a geocentric orbit. Currently T-minus 12 minutes, 33 seconds and counting. For those who may not have been with us the first go around when we talked about the booster that will be supporting this mission, it'll be launching when it does lift off for the 15th time on this particular flight. This is also set to mark SpaceX's 353rd Falcon 9 launch so far, the 296th booster reflight, or the launch of a booster that has flown at least once. And when it lands, this will be the 86th landing on the drone ship, just to read the instructions, and the 328th booster landing in total. So before all of that happens, let's go ahead and talk about where we've been with this particular first stage booster, tail number 1076 in the SpaceX fleet, before it gets ready to add a 15th notch in its proverbial belt. This booster began flying back in late 2022, launching from Launch Complex 39A. This was the Commercial Resupply Services Mission, or CRS-26, sending a cargo Dragon spacecraft up to the International Space Station. On board at the time was more than 7,700 pounds of cargo and science experiments for the crew that was on board at the ISS at the time. The second launch of this booster was on January 10th of 2023. This was the OneWeb Flight 16 mission, the second of 3 dedicated launches of the OneWeb constellation. After Russia invaded Ukraine, of course, OneWeb lost the Soyuz rocket as a launch vehicle. It decided to buy 3 flights from SpaceX and 2 from India to send up its remaining satellites, which are manufactured not too far away from where we're sitting right now, over on Merritt Island at the Airbus OneWeb satellite facility. It was followed by this first Starlink mission for this booster, Starlink 6-1. Also notable because it was the first batch of the Starlink V2 mini satellites that were sent up to low Earth orbit. That was followed up on April 7th when this booster supported the Intelsat 40E launch. The communications satellite also had a hosted payload for NASA called the Tropospheric Emissions Monitoring of Pollution, or TEMPO, instrument. This is a UV visible spectrometer that monitors air pollutants hourly across North America. It can measure pollutants from an area as small as 4 square miles.
40 in Florida. Today's launch marks SpaceX's 6th.
During the daytime, it can measure things like ozone, sulfur dioxide, formaldehyde. At nighttime, this can also track light pollution. Moving on, launches 5 through 8 were Starlink flights. Those were 6-3 on May 19th, 6-6 on July 24th, 6-14 on September 9th, 6-21 on October 5th. The next flight, number 9, carried the pair of O3B mPOWER satellites, numbers 5 and 6, up to medium Earth orbit on behalf of Luxembourg-based company SES. 10th launch was the Ovzon 3 satellite on behalf of the company Ovzon. That mission was on January 3rd, 2024. Launch 11 was a batch of 23 Starlink satellites on the Starlink 6-40 mission, lifting off from Slick 40 on Leap Day this year, February 29th. That was followed up by the launch of the Eutelsat 36D satellite for French satellite operator Eutelsat on March 30th. And most recently, it sent up Starlink satellites on the Starlink 6-54 mission on April 28th and 6-64 on June 1st. As we're looking wide here at the pad from our vantage point at the press site, you can see weather conditions continue to track well as SpaceX is looking for a liftoff of its Falcon 9 rocket in 8 minutes and counting. Before we get there, though, let's go ahead and talk about the workhorse vehicle for SpaceX, the Falcon 9 rocket, which stands at 70 meters, or 229 feet tall, has a diameter of 3.66 meters, or 12 feet. The majority of that is made up by the Falcon 9's first stage, bottom 2/3 of the rocket. And as we just learned, this particular booster has flown 14 times before, looking for number 15 today. At the base of the first stage are 9 Merlin 1D engines, which burn a combination of rocket-grade kerosene and liquid oxygen and produce 1.7 million pounds of thrust. Around the engine compartment are black carbon fiber landing legs that will be used to land the first stage booster on the drone ship. Just read the instructions. As we continue up the rocket, above the first stage is the inner stage, although I will pause and note for reference right now, it is T-minus 7 minutes, 2 seconds and counting, and SpaceX at now is beginning the engine chill down process, where they flow a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps on those aforementioned Merlin 1D engines to protect them from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. Coming back to this inner stage, this is a composite structure which consists of an aluminum honeycomb core surrounded by carbon fiber. In the image on the right-hand side of your screen, You can see deployable hypersonic grid fins. These titanium winglets provide stability and steering for the Falcon 9 as it comes back through the atmosphere tail first like a big old dart. At the top of the inner stage are 3 mechanical latches that attach to the second stage. And at first stage main engine cutoff, high pressure helium is used to release those latches, and 4 pneumatic pushers ensure a clean separation. Second stage engine nozzles also housed safely inside the inner stage adapter until stage separation. Speaking of that second stage, as we cruise on into T-minus 6 minutes counting, the upper stage of the Falcon 9, powered by a single modified Merlin engine called a Merlin vacuum engine, or an MVAC engine. It's equipped with a large nozzle which is optimized for burns in the vacuum of space, hence the name. It produces more than 200,000 pounds of thrust, and it will be fired twice on today's flight to place the Turksat 6A satellite into its intended orbit. Because this is sending that satellite up to GEO, though, it will not have a third burn to deorbit it as it would normally, but instead it will head to a graveyard orbit safely out of the way of those geostationary satellites. Finally, above the second stage are those payload fairings, which are currently encapsulating the Turksat 6A satellite. The fairings are made up of a carbon composite material, and they are 13.1 meters or 43 feet tall, 5.2 meters or 17.1 feet in diameter. Fairing halves will be recovered a little further downrange from where the booster lands on the drone ship, and they gently splash down under parachutes. As we are coming back to focus on the rocket itself, the mission, we're T-minus 4 minutes, 43 seconds and counting. In just a few seconds, the strong back retract sequence will begin. I'll start with the clamp arms opening up, and then the transporter erector of the strong back will recline about 1.5 degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket. It stays in that position until liftoff, at which point it'll pull back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9 when it's ready for liftoff. As you see from the SpaceX feed here in the big box, that strong back now reclining just a short distance away from the Falcon 9 rocket. We're now a little more than 3 minutes away from liftoff. Coming up in about 15 seconds, the first stage liquid oxygen loading process should be wrapping up. I want to thank the more than 13,000 of you who are watching with us live this afternoon or evening. Appreciate your patience as we watch SpaceX and the 45th Weather Squadron monitor the weather conditions and get to this point where they're preparing to lift off in less than 3 minutes now. If you haven't already, we'd certainly appreciate it if you could hit that like button to allow some more folks to find their way into this live coverage, as we're just about 2.5 minutes away now. Briefly want to thank Jim Edgar for a very generous $50 super chat. Wonderful to see you again this evening, Jim. Jim says, Lisa B and Jim Edgar watching from Snoqualmie, Washington, along with the cats, Millie, Rex, and Kip. Go SpaceX. Go Turkey. Mel Roberts Herod with a $10 super chat. Thank you, Mel. Saying, sure glad to be watching with all of y'all. Hope you're doing well, Mel, whether you're down here with us in the Cocoa Beach area or if you're up in Chicagoland. And lastly, for now, I wanted to thank Valerie Jones for being a channel member for 7 months, saying, thanks for making it possible for this Utah girl to attend every launch I want. Spaceflight now rocks. Well, thank you for your ongoing support, Valerie. As we're about a minute and a half away from liftoff. We're going to go ahead and focus on the rocket here. The venting you're seeing are the ground gas closeouts. Falcon 9 also now fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. That combination of RP-1 or rocket-grade kerosene and liquid oxygen. T-minus 1 minute and counting. The call the Falcon 9 is in startup. We're waiting for the final go for launch call. And we've got that go for launch from the SpaceX launch director now. T-minus 25 seconds and counting. 20 seconds. 15 seconds. And here we go. In 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition and liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket, launching the Turksat 6A satellite. Falcon 9 has cleared the tower. Now 30 seconds into flight. Let's listen to the roar of those 9 mighty engines. Now about a minute and a half into flight. Falcon 9 now passing through Max Q, the point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle. Got some views from our friend Pete Carson's with Max Q Productions here. Been a little tricky to track through the clouds here. That's why we've got our crews spread out across the Space Coast to bring you the best possible views. Again, the clouds making it a bit tricky today. We're doing our level best. We're looking at a few different events in fairly rapid succession now as we cross the 2-minute mark. T plus 2 minutes and 32 seconds will be first stage main engine cutoff, followed 3 seconds later by stage separation. Then the second stage engine will ignite at T plus 2 minutes 43 seconds, setting up for the fairings to deploy at about 3 minutes and 15 seconds. Nice view of our little planet there from the SpaceX onboard cameras.
Confirmed.
And back ignition.
Some good callouts from SpaceX, as you can see those events happening on screen here. Given the amount of cloud cover, it may be difficult to see that first stage entry burn. If, and I'll stress if, we are able to catch views of that though, we will of course bring those to you Given the amount of cloud cover in the area, though, it may be a little tricky, but we will, again, do our level best here. Now about 3.5 minutes into flight. Fairings have separated. The next milestone coming up will be the first stage entry burn, beginning at T plus 6 minutes and 16 seconds. You see on the far left-hand side of your screen, appears like one of those fairing halves still in view, just drifting out of view there. SpaceX will use its recovery vessel Bob to try to scoop those up out of the Atlantic Ocean. It and the other recovery vessel, Doug, were named after former NASA astronauts Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley, the duo who flew the Demo 2 mission for SpaceX up to the International Space Station back in May of 2020. Just as a quick point of housekeeping, you can see our clock in the top right-hand corner of your screen, slightly different than what we're seeing from SpaceX there on the center of your screen. Our clock is in real time, and what's coming in from SpaceX is on a slight delay, so we'll call out the events mostly in real time for the ones that we'll be able to see from the ground, hopefully with the start of that entry burn. Then we'll mostly focus on the SpaceX clock there, since the events will be visible only from the onboard cameras at that point. We're now less than a minute away from the start of that first stage entry burn in real time. Looking up through the inner stage on the Falcon 9 booster. That's the box on the left-hand side of your screen. On the right-hand side, you're looking at the Merlin vacuum engine. The reason you're seeing the viewpoint on the right-hand side toggle back and forth is because it allows SpaceX engineers to monitor both sides of that Merlin vacuum engine and ensure that it's continuing a good and even burn. We're now coming up, speaking of burns, on the start of that entry burn in just about 5 seconds in real time. So our Pete Karstens is scanning the skies, hoping to catch a glimpse of that. Again, as you can see, there's a lot of cloud cover, so may not be visible from the ground here. You see the start of that entry burn there on the SpaceX delay. In real time, the entry burn has begun, so unfortunately, the clouds proved to be just a little bit too much for us here on the ground today, but fortunately we've got those onboard camera views provided by SpaceX. With the conclusion of that entry burn, you can see the speedometer on that first stage booster has dropped quite a bit as the altitude continues to plummet as well. SpaceX essentially slamming on the brakes with that first stage booster, also being aided by atmospheric drag. The hypersonic grid fins that you see there help provide steering and stability as that booster is making its way down towards the drone ship. Just read the instructions. Coming through the clouds here, you'll occasionally see a couple of bursts in between those grid fins. Those are the cold gas thrusters, which help adjust the attitude of the first stage booster. As we're hearing from SpaceX, the fairing halves are also have quite a bit of life under them. One half has flown for, or is flying for a 16th time, the other flying for a 10th time. So if you can believe it, one of the fairing halves slightly older than the booster that it caught a ride with. Now T plus 8 minutes 15 seconds into flight. See the Merlin vacuum engine concluding its first burn here. Set up the start of the landing burn momentarily. Some views of the Turksat 6A satellite here. And while it was the views from on board the Falcon 9 first stage were lost momentarily, you could see visually from the drone ship cameras the first stage booster down on the drone ship just to read the instructions. A little bit of a soggy deck there, so some of the stormy conditions that we were seeing here at the Cape also present out there near the drone ship recovery site. So at this point in the flight, because this is a customer mission, SpaceX is going to continue on with its on-camera views as long as it's able to get those back from the ground. So looking live at the Turksat 6A satellite. Now a little more than 10 minutes into flight in real time, just about at that point from the SpaceX feed. The next milestone coming up as it continues on this coast phase, the Merlin vacuum engine will reignite for a second burn at T plus 27 minutes, 17 seconds. That burn lasting about 63 seconds in total. And that'll set up the Turksat 6A satellite to deploy at about T plus 35 minutes and 31 seconds. As we continue to track the progress of the second stage and the Turksat satellite, I want to thank a few folks for your support this evening. Our thanks to Helena Olejnik. Apologies, Helena, if I mispronounced your last name there, or your first name, honestly. But really appreciate the 10 Canadian dollars super chat and your support as a channel member. Zachary Wood, also with a $10 super chat. Thank you, Zachary. Hope you're doing well this evening. We noted a good liftoff and wish the mission Godspeed. Appreciate Rick Caporelli for a $2 super chat. Thank you, Rick. SG joining us again this evening with a $5 super chat and a bravo clapping corgi. And a welcome to Zachary Wood joining us with channel membership at the mission specialist levels. So welcome aboard, Zachary. We're very glad to have you with us in our channel member community here. We're now T plus 18 minutes, 46 seconds and counting. Again, the next milestone for this mission is coming up at the T plus 27 minute, 17 second mark, when there will be a second burn of the Merlin vacuum engine lasting just over a minute, preparing for the deployment of the Turksat 6A satellite, T plus 35 minutes and 31 seconds. As we're waiting, though, since we've got a good liftoff and a good landing of the first stage booster, let's go ahead and take a moment to note the SpaceX mission stats as they currently stand. This was the 15th launch of this particular first stage booster, tail number 1076 in the SpaceX fleet. This was SpaceX's 353rd Falcon 9 launch to date. They'll get to the 500s eventually. This was the 68th Falcon 9 launch of 2024. The 296th Falcon booster reflight, or the launch of a booster that has flown at least once. This was SpaceX's 69th orbital launch of 2024, including the Falcon Heavy launch, sending up the NOAA weather satellite called GOES-U. And as a matter of fact, just earlier today, just pulling this up, making sure I've got my dates right. Yes, officially, the GOES-U satellite has reached its planned geostationary orbit at 22,236 miles above the Earth. And so it has shifted from being GOES-U as now officially GOES-19. So congrats to NOAA for reaching that milestone. Again, that was launched on the most recent Falcon Heavy rocket launch. This was SpaceX's 120th orbital launch within the last 365 days, the 196th orbital launch from SpaceX from Pad 40, and the 251st overall orbital launch from this particular pad. Taking a look at where SpaceX stands on its progress towards a goal of 144 missions or more on the year. Notched 69 so far, including the Falcon Heavy. Moving on to some recovery stats. This was the 86th landing of a booster on the drone ship. Just read the instructions. This was SpaceX's 257th overall drone ship landing and the 328th booster landing to date. Finally, some industry stats. This was the 50th launch from Florida this year, the 73rd from U.S. soil. This was the 81st orbital launch from a U.S. rocket company, and the 131st orbital launch around the world, including 3 launch mishaps. Taking a look at the orbital pie chart, got the U.S. now at currently T plus 24 minutes, 42 seconds and counting. The next local launch we are tracking is coming up, we believe, on the 13th of July. And of course will be this Saturday, if all remains on track. You can see the strong back has been brought up to its upright position, part of SpaceX's process of turning around the pad as quickly as possible in pursuit of future flights. You see there the Merlin vacuum engine briefly. That engine will ignite again at the T plus 27 minute 17 second mark, so just a little over a minute from now. As you're seeing the trajectory map here for however briefly this will remain up, you can see where it splits there. That gray line will be the point at which the Merlin vacuum engine will reignite and boost the second stage with Turksat 6A satellite. There you can see that Merlin vacuum engine reigniting. Again, this burn will last just a little bit more than a minute. This will boost the second stage. Confirmation from SpaceX of nominal orbital insertion. You can see the Merlin vacuum engine now powering down. Got a few more minutes left to wait before the satellite is deployed. Again, that's coming up at T plus 35 minutes and 31 seconds. As we're waiting for the conclusion of the mission, want to thank one of our wonderful moderators, Callistia Lee, for gifting 10 Spaceflight Now memberships. Really appreciate that, Callistia. And to our newest 10 channel members, welcome aboard. We're glad to have you with us. Be sure to thank Callistia in the live chat if you haven't already. We're now T plus 33 minutes, 27 seconds in real time, 33 minutes, 16 seconds from the SpaceX feed. We are now less than, or just about 2 minutes away from the deployment of the Turksat 6A satellite. You can see the second stage continuing to cruise over the African continent, making its way, coasting over. Looks like it's coming up on the coastline there. This is a promotional video from Turksat, talking about the capabilities of that satellite you see right there. Getting ready to deploy in just over a minute from now. Looking at the SpaceX feed, we are now just about 10 seconds away from deployment of that satellite. We'll have deployed by now in real time, though. And there it goes. A successful deployment of the Turksat 6A satellite, the first satellite manufactured and operated from the country of Turkey. Again, this was the 69th orbital launch from SpaceX this year, 68 using a Falcon 9 rocket. And with that, we're going to go ahead and close things out as we've already run through our mission stats. And it looks like nothing new to report from the live chat. So want to thank our wonderful moderators in the live chat who've been helping us out this afternoon into the early evening. Our thanks to Callistia Lee, Astro Joe, Astro Jen, and Rusty Shackelford. And thanks as always to Stephanie B as well when she's able to help us out. Our thanks to our Spaceflight Now editor Stephen Young for running the technical operations of the broadcast. Our friends Pete Carstens with Max Q Productions and Chuck Briggs for doing as valiant a job as anyone could expect given the cloudy conditions to track the Falcon 9 rocket. Our thanks to our wonderful launch photographers Adam Bernstein, Michael Kane as well. You can find their work on X at MD Kane Jr., Adam at ABurnNYC. And while you're there, be sure to follow Spaceflight Now simply at Spaceflight Now. And just as a reminder, now's a great time to subscribe to Spaceflight Now on your way out the digital door. And we'll have robust coverage of the debut launch of the Ariane 6 rocket lifting off on its inaugural flight tomorrow afternoon. We'll be joined by a friend of the channel who is going to be live for us inside the European Space Agency headquarters in France. So you'll be wanting to tune in to our live coverage for that, and we look forward to seeing you back here then. Most importantly of all, I want to thank you for watching wherever you're joining us from, and we appreciate your ongoing support of what we do here at Spaceflight Now. For all of us here at the team, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Remember, be good to yourselves, be good to others, and we will see you next time, folks. Bye-bye.